Welcome to my interview series where I share conversations originally recorded live on LinkedIn. In each episode, I sit down with thoughtful people to explore their work, their ideas and the stories behind them. Whether you're here to learn, reflect or discover a new perspective, I'm so glad you're listening. Let's get into the conversation. Welcome to this session on Clear Under Pressure, Confidence, Conflict and Communication when the stakes are high. And I'm joined today by the very lovely Garth Stinson, who has extensive experience in both the police and the military police and counterterrorism. And he uses all of that experience now to train leaders and teams in communication, dealing with difficult situations through his company, Training for Reality. And I know he also runs a lot of sessions to support the safety of women and girls, which is a really important part of his work. So welcome, Garth. Thank you for joining me. Are you well?
I am, Kaffy. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to this. Very well, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, good. We've got so much to get into today.
Let's go.
Amazing. Let's go. So we're going to start with talking about what pressure does to communication, because I know this is something you've felt yourself, you've seen in a lot of other people in lots of different situations. So what do you think in your world, the high stakes world, what are the common mistakes that people are making when the stakes are high, when, you know, adrenaline is running the show? What are the common mistakes that people are making?
Probably the most common I see, and I'm talking both in my old work of military police, and actually just in the work environment, sort of civilian life. People don't create thinking time to allow the sort of effects of fight, flight, and freeze to be mitigated or to go down a little bit. And they tend to want to make decisions really quickly and feel as if they always need to have the right answer. Which again is not the best thing. It's nearly like we have to respond straight away. In terms of conflict with individuals, the one thing I'll say to people, if they remember nothing else, is validate the emotion of the person, because conflict is all about emotions. So if you don't validate the emotion by empathy, you can ultimately end up trying to justify why you've said what you've done or why the process doesn't work. They're not really interested, but that's why I'd say validate the emotion is one of the main things. Create that thinking time. If you can and you've got the space, have some sort of structured decision-making model. So you're actually looking at facts, not assumptions, which helps mitigate things like unconscious bias, stereotype and prejudice that we've all got. And the fact that it's unconscious tells a story, can't do much about it. And then it helps you with ethical, legal decisions. It helps you look at risk. It helps you look at actions. And I would say those are probably the main common mistakes. Time, you feel you need to answer everything. You don't validate the person's emotion. You get into defending yourself. And ultimately, you don't really have a structure to help mitigate what's happening in the brain and the body.
Yes, and what can somebody do? What are your top tips? You mentioned a decision-making model there. What are the top things that people can do to stay clear in that moment when pressure hits?
The easiest way is to say do the opposite of what people tend to do. So have a structured decision-making model. Give yourself the time and sometimes the physical space to answer questions, to think. Then have a structure in your brain to slow your thinking down. So all the probably top tips, again, to look at the physiology is breathing. Breathing is so important. It links into the vagus nerve, which comes off the back of the brainstem, goes into, you're connected to pretty much every organ in the body. And the quickest way to get your heart rate down, which is a major effect of fight, flight, and freeze, is to breathe. So maybe in through the nose for 4, hold it for 5, out through the mouth for 6, hold it for 7, box breathing. That's really important and extremely effective. Might look a bit weird in certain situations. Asking open questions is a good thing to do. It takes a lot of emotion to actually be angry. So if somebody's venting their spleen at you, then actually let them have what, and certainly in the police days, we would call free recall. So let them say what they need to say.
Right.
That is creating your thinking time, which I've talked about. It's giving you time to slow down the fight, flight, and freeze responses, to get your breathing right, which affects your tone of voice, as you well know, which can make you look more confident or less confrontational. And I put together a little mnemonic called WAR. If you don't want war, then wait, acknowledge, and respond. So, W for wait, acknowledge, and respond. So wait, let them say what they're going to say. Gives you thinking time, gives you time to calm down a little bit, gives you time to breathe, may even give you time to think of the answers or in conflict where your escape routes are. Acknowledge how you validate that emotion and then respond. But also be honest, if you don't have the right answer, say, I don't know. And probably finally use really good open questions. Because when people are shouting or they're getting really angry, if you give them an open question, the brain has to stop. If I can answer something with yes or no, I don't really have to think about what my answers are and I'm keep on my rant. If somebody gives me an open question where I have to think about it, 5WH, who, what, why, where, and how, the brain has to think, hold on, you've asked me an open question. Then it has to stop and think very quickly about the actual question itself. I just add in, be careful with why, because why can be quite a judgmental question. But yeah, good open questions. Just give yourself time. It's all about keeping it simple, keeping it basic. Let them vent the spleen and then validate that emotion again. So wait, acknowledge,
That's
respond.
amazing. Yeah, I love it. And we've talked at length, haven't we, about the whole nervous system piece? Because obviously we come at things from different angles, but we're actually teaching a lot of the same stuff. So
Very
I, as you
much,
know,
yeah.
work with anxious speakers, and it's a very similar reaction in the brain, isn't it? It's it's that sort of
100%.
fight, flight, freeze. So I mean, absolutely, I think regulation that you just talked about there with the breathing has to come first, because your nervous system has to feel safe enough for your thinking and language to stay online. If that survival brain is taken over, so we don't get the access that we would normally have to nuanced thought, to connection, to empathy, we just prioritize getting through that moment. So yeah, I might steal that war.
It's all yours.
That's really good. But also there's a thing, isn't there, that if you give your first reaction, you're only processing in sort of certain parts of the brain. If you give yourself a chance to pause just the split second, just to let it run through more areas of the brain so that you have a better perspective on things. And
100%. It's a really good point, actually, Kaffy. So the way I explain that in my courses is, if you think of the brain, think of a high road and a low road in the brain. So you get a threat. Now that threat, really important bit you mentioned there, the threat of, hardwired biological, the threat of a saber-toothed tiger. We needed to be able in primeval days to just use a spear and stab the saber-toothed tiger. We need that instant response. We need to act on instinct, not analysis. But our modern day saber-toothed tiger could be fear of public speaking. It could be somebody actually squaring up to you with a weapon. As you say, it's identical. And the brain isn't that advanced still to this day to work out. So the physiological effects are the same. So what happens at the exact same time as the threat, whatever that may be, comes in, the high road takes it through the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking, planning, rational part of the brain. At the exact same time, it's going through the low road, which is the instinctive part of the brain. That triggers the amygdala, a little walnut-sized watchdog in the brain. But the problem is the amygdala triggers in like 20 milliseconds.
Yeah.
And the thinking part of the brain takes about 100 milliseconds. I think it's like 400 or 500 milliseconds with a blink of an eye. So this is happening quickly. So to create that time, you will effectively manually switch off your threat response. So it's so important to give yourself time to think and time to let your brain and your body do what it's doing. You don't want to stop it, but you need to give it the time. And the only way you can create that time is by actually either giving somebody else time to speak, and then if it's a complex situation, actually give yourself distance. But yeah, the brain's an amazing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we're sort of fighting our own brain, though, aren't we? And you mentioned the breathing there. There's a technique that I really like because it's so fast that I know they teach in the military as well, which is what we call the psychological sigh. So it's the in breath, but then the top up breath, and then the long exhale, and it's so fast. I often teach that. I mean, obviously we're talking about actual crisis situations, but an actual crisis for some people is the 10-second round at networking. And I often say, when the mic is coming round, a few of those as it's
100%.
coming round to you, because it's going to slow your heart rate, it's going to lower your blood pressure. As I would say to people, your breathing is not like woo, this is actual science. So, and I think we teach the similar sort of things there. But yeah, the breath is a really good one, to come back to the breath.
Yeah, 100%.
So talking about So we use this word confidence a lot. It's a
Mhm.
very contested term. I'm wondering what you think about confidence. How do you distinguish between someone in a high stakes situation, someone who looks controlled, and someone who is genuinely, present, grounded, confident? What does real confidence look like in that situation?
For me, it's more natural, whatever natural may be. For example, things like if I am holding more eye contact, and I caveat that with there could be cultural reasons or reasons of hierarchy where people don't want to stare, um, or different cultures could see it as it could be more aggressive than passive, and some religions, for example, it's not acceptable to maybe stare at certain people for a long time, or different male female.
Mm.
For me, it's about the body language, the confidence. So I think you spot it. If you've not heard, you probably have heard, but if there's a thing called, there's a chap called Albert Meribian, and it's probably the worst taught thing about
Yeah,
communication, how communication is
yeah,
broken
yeah,
down.
yeah.
People say, we communicate 55% of the time using body language, and then 7% spoken word, etc. And I think the other one's 38%. The reality is, I call it his sincerity model. When somebody isn't being sincere, because we were hardwired before we even started physically communicating with each other, we were hardwired to read body language because there was no language. If you think somebody's being insincere, you'll take 55% more cognizance of what their body language is telling you, i.e., can you tell your face you're happy then when somebody's clearly not happy by their words? So I think the body language is the biggest read. If somebody's not being natural, maybe they sound a bit scripted or a little bit robotic, that to me is a good sign that somebody's maybe not that confident. If they're trying to overtalk you, if they are, because effectively what it's telling me is they're triggered. And again, what I'm doing is I'm reading the same body language I would read for pre-attack indicators if somebody's about to attack me in a conflict situation, in a face-to-face. So the body language, again, it's not differentiating between whether you're lying, whether you're about to get attacked, whether you're about to attack. It will still display a lot of the same pre-attack or lack of confidence indicators, I suppose. That said, some people just lack confidence, and it could be because they're not correctly trained. It's not because they're weak or they're not capable. So I think there's a subtle difference there. But for me, it's the main thing is reading that body language, and seeing if they're natural, seeing if they're actually looking and even listening to you with eye contact and repeating back what you're saying.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. I think I love the Moravian studies, but you're right. They can be misquoted. But I think the best thing that he did, which of course spawned so many studies that came after him, was about the alignment between the body and the words, so that
Hmm.
we are, because as you know, we process the non-verbal communication at a much deeper level
Yeah,
than anything else really. We have gut instinct, as you're saying before. Our brains are wired to process threat, to process things almost, we're not aware of what we're processing. We're just it's just all happening. But that lack of alignment. So if the if the body is you know big but the words are small, or the opposite, if the body is small but the words are confident and threatening,
yeah,
that's when we lose trust there. And I
yeah,
think that
100%.
that's really, that we will always believe the body language over the words.
What's interesting is women, and Rob, you'll not thank me for saying this, if you're still with us. Women are actually scientifically more empathetic, and they've actually got a wider peripheral vision, and that goes back to they were in the cave looking after the child. It's the hunter-gatherer syndrome,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
men in general can see fast-moving things from distance because they were hunters.
Right.
So
Yeah.
women can walk into a room and spot things that a lot of men can't see, and they will
And
pick they
remember
will pick
them.
up on stuff.
Yeah, and remember
Yeah,
them as well afterwards.
in the main,
Okay.
I have no
Yeah.
examples that I know people that breach both those examples. But
Yeah. Right. So you just mentioned there about going into a room and seeing things. Talking about reading a room, because when I teach public speaking, one of the most important things I think for people to learn is that the audience whispering is the reading the room, is the feeling the energy in the room, and then having the ability, hopefully, to either match or curate that energy. But the reading the room, it's become this phrase, and I think everybody means something slightly different by it. If you're talking about reading the room, I guess reading the other person in a challenging situation, maybe when someone does have a weapon, or whether if you don't know if they do or don't have a weapon, what comes into that for you? What does your training tell you? How do you train other people? What should they be looking for not in a public speaking situation, but in an actual crisis situation where tensions are high, there are many unknowns? What are the things that you would be teaching people to look out for?
The main thing is spotting something that's outside the baseline, i.e. what's not normal for that location. However, heavily caveat it with, just because it might sit outside the baseline of what's normal for that area, and I'll give you an example in a minute, it doesn't necessarily mean they're up to something wrong.
Right.
It could be they're lost. So the best way is to describe an example. So let's say somebody is doing hostile reconnaissance on a government building. Let's say it's somewhere like King's Cross train station, everybody will probably relate to in London. So in the morning, in the 7 main stations in London, during the week, you'll get X amount of millions of people come in between a certain period of time. They'll come in and they'll be coming into the city. So the flow of the ants as such will be coming in. They'll be getting off the tubes, the trains, the buses, out of the taxis, and they'll be walking with purpose to their next venue because they're on their way to work. Yeah. They'll be dressed probably in a fairly similar way. And even that changes depending on what part of London you're in. Mm-hmm. So some are more casual, more creative than the suits, maybe out in the square mile. So first of all, you have to have a way of filtering what could be hundreds of thousands of people in very, very busy environments, mass transit environments, or crowded places. So what you have to do is, first of all, is say, right, is anybody doing anything that's different? So is anybody wearing any different clothing? This is not profiling them. Is anybody not walking with purpose? Is anybody standing still when everybody else is walking fast? Is anybody going a different direction against the flow of traffic? So that's your filters. Then that will help you filter out, why is somebody doing something different? Because people that are doing hostile reconnaissance, unless they're very, very good, of course, and there's technical means they can use, they will have to at some point have a look around and check their surroundings, because they may be looking for the police or the military. They may be looking for security services. So their body language will make them stand out slightly. And remember that it's unconscious. They might not realize they're doing it. So that gives you a starting point to then look at, okay, well, that person's doing something different. Let me maybe investigate it by asking them, talking to them, or even better, watching them, stepping back and watching them from a distance in a covert capacity. And it may be that actually you go into amber red alert for a little bit. You look at what's happening. You're giving yourself time to process what's happening in that high road. So you're ruling out, you're helping to rule out bias and stereotyping and prejudice. And then you're thinking, oh, actually, 1 + 1 = 2. They are simply waiting on a mate, or they're lost. They're not casing the joint out. Mm-hmm. What then helps further and then you can build up that observation, maybe to investigation, maybe to questioning. And if they run away then, or react when you approach them, that can up your levels of suspicion. But most people are probably just lost or doing something that's just not normal behavior for that area or that time of day. Another way to do it is I'll teach people to scan the room. So your brain can't cope with busy scenes, and it loves patterns, as you well know. So if you get into the pattern, and I teach, you scan from left to right along the foreground first, then you scan right to left in the middle ground, and then you scan left to right in the background, because you're eating the elephant a piece at a time. Your brain will love patterns. It will get used to doing it very quickly. And you're what I call the crocodile nearest the boat. You scan the foreground first, because that's the most likely area to hurt you, or you're most likely if the threat's closest. Yeah. So it's a mix, really, Kaffy, of understanding what's not normal for that area, making sure you don't treat that as it means they're up to something, because a lot of the time it's not. And then using the second filter of actually scanning your environment from front to back, moving your head left to right, actually breaks down tunnel vision. That can actually switch your tunnel vision off, because fight, flight, and freeze gives you that. And you're giving yourself the chance to notice issues, really, and then you can read body language as well. But it's a massive funnel to filter down thousands and thousands of people, or hundreds of people.
That's amazing. Amazing. And in a smaller situation then, so say you are, so say there's a single person or a couple of people that might be trouble. What are you looking for on a more granular level? What do you see in somebody who is potentially maybe not violent yet, but what are the signs that you would look for in their body that something might be happening?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's hundreds of these, but the sort of most common ones that I've seen in the police, for example, or when I was doing any sort of covert work, again, is the body language, because it happens subconsciously, and this is where the brain and the physiological effects in the body. So you're getting adrenaline and cortisol just pumped into your body to give you extra strength to fight or run away. You're getting the shakes, maybe because you can't control that adrenaline cortisol dump. Maybe your skin might redden, and we all react differently because your blood is superheating. Because it's like, think of Star Trek. It's all part of the shields, and all the lights dim on the bridge, and it literally all the blood goes from your extremities to your major muscles, and it needs to carry oxygen to the brain to process this threat in milliseconds. So none of us can stop this happening. We get used. The more exposure you get to, i.e., training for reality and realistically, as emergency services, you're able to deal with and manage that more efficiently. But ultimately, in a room, things like, weirdly, this is quite a fun one. If you're in a room and you're boring the pants off somebody and they don't want to be there, their feet will start to point towards the exit.
Oh, really?
And we all do it. And I know I do it. And I even test myself on it. But people's bodies literally the feet tend to go first, and then their body sort of follows.
Right, okay.
Or they'll yawn, or they'll start looking, the obvious ones, they'll look
so
at the
watch. So if I start like drifting off the screen, you think
exactly.
Really brilliant.
Falling asleep's a good one. That's a classic. If you fall asleep, I think, like, Kaffy's had enough now. And that happens to me quite a lot, obviously.
Yeah, there's so much that we can't control. So with me, obviously, I've been speaking and performing a long time. I can pretty much always keep control of my face and my voice and my body. The one thing I can't control is the blushing. So I'm doing quite well today, but there's some sort of, video podcast of me and stuff where you can see my, my neck and my cheeks. And this is because, everything else is controlled. Yeah. And, I'm a stage performer. So, generally as a stage performer, it doesn't matter. But because I am still, I still do suffer with stage fright, effectively with anxiety. So I have all of my tools that I use, and I always tell people, I build my confidence, every day. I'm constantly building my confidence. There's loads of ways that you do that. But at the end of the day, you can't sort of hide everything about yourself, because so much of it is just happening in your body and you can't control it. And actually, I think one of the great skills of leadership communication is to be able to have enough control of your physical state and your voice to kind of choose how you come across, because you can't always choose how you feel. You might feel angry or frustrated or frightened. You might feel frightened, but sometimes it's not appropriate for those emotions to be coming through. You also have to stay clear enough, like we've talked about with the mind, to be able to think what it is that you want to say, to be able to assess that situation clearly. But sometimes you might have to show strength when you're not feeling it. You might have to show empathy or kindness to someone that you really don't like. Sometimes, a lot of the time, leaders have to give bad news, and they would rather not be doing it. But all of these are skills that we learn, and I think this is why we always say you develop as a leader. You're not born a leader. This is a massive skill set to do all of these things that we're talking about. To take that breath, to regulate, to think, what do I need to do in this situation? What's my intention? What's my action in this situation? Yeah. Sometimes your emotions can show through, obviously, but sometimes they're not helpful. And sometimes
there's a couple of points there, Kaffy. You made some great points there. So one is having the self-awareness of your own triggers, number one, we've all got triggers. We've all got red lines. Knowing what your red lines are, i.e. knowing when your emotions will show, is really important, because that is probably the time, if you've got the luxury of taking yourself out of the situation, you need to do it, and you need to be man or woman enough to do it. And especially if you're in a senior position, you need to, what I call, suspend your ego and leave it at the door, or go, I am not in the right frame of mind. I'm not the right person. I don't, or just another way is to show a little bit of vulnerability, which is a lot of leaders won't do, or managers won't do, is like, I'm really angry this morning, folks. I'm sorry, but something happened overnight, and I'm really angry about it. The behavior of the team. You can see I'm angry. I'm clearly not going to hide it. So, but what I want to do, and by telling them you're angry, as opposed to trying to be passively angry, I think just be honest with people. That honesty kicks in. So self-awareness of what your triggers are, self-awareness of what your tells are. You said yours is going red, mine is going quiet. I'm never quiet. You know that.
You're never
quiet. My mum talks for Ireland, but when I go quiet, people go, uh-oh, I'm either sleeping or I'm going,
Yeah.
But me knowing that myself and other people, and this is where relationships. So if I know I've triggered you, or you know you've triggered me, that's the time to not just give myself thinking space and time, is to give the other person time to think, hold on, show a bit of empathy. So self-awareness, self-regulation, emotional intelligence every time. But there's times when you go, I'm angry, folks. It's written all over my face. I'm not going to try and hide it. No, we need to get a grip of what's just happened, and the behavior is totally unacceptable. So we're going to talk about it. But I'm sorry, this is why my voice is shaking, because I'm fuming. And that's a good one. And because people go, oh, at least he's been honest. We can tell you're angry. We don't need to be Sherlock Holmes. So honesty, integrity, and just be human. Be human no matter what position you're in. But self-awareness, massive, 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 massive.
I think with the nerves, because obviously I work with quite a lot of other people who are anxious speakers now, and the shaky voice is something that you can control. It's very difficult to control the blushing, but you can control the voice, and it's all to do with the breath, really, and in all the stuff that we've been talking about. And I think sometimes it's almost about convincing your own brain as well, because we have this thing with an emotional voice, we tend to crack a lot. So you can sort of hear if someone's about to cry, because you'll hear this crack in their voice. And, the messages are going between the lamps in the brain all the time about my emotional state. So if if I'm well trained enough to produce a nice, strong, confident, resonant tone, my brain goes, oh, okay, we're all right, actually. As opposed to letting, because it's like a spiral then, that if you let the emotions show in your voice, you're going to feel those emotions more, and you get that quiver. It's a really good sign, as you just said, of anger. If someone's voice sort of shakes, not cracks exactly, this is for like upset, but if somebody shakes, it's like that rush of stress hormones, isn't it? That's sort of causing that quiver.
But even knowing that, I mean, I've got a phrase I've used for years: chaos is normal. So when I turned up the London bombings in 7/7/7, 2005, you turn up. I'd been to other bombing scenes, but never suicide bombers, and never in mainland UK. And I was one of the sergeants there. And chaos is normal. You're doing the swan, but everybody's looking towards you. So I'm conscious of my breathing, what I say, how I say it, how I literally walk, how I conduct myself. If I look scared, then that transfers. The same with when I was a police dog handler. Your energy transfers down the lead,
which is that's a great example of
sometimes
it's not appropriate for your emotions to show. Sometimes 100%. It is, but sometimes we can be in a situation where you might. So I'm guessing you were pretty frightened actually that day. Even though you're Garth Stinson, I'm sure you because there was a lot of fear, unknown, but it wasn't appropriate, because in that role you had to give that sort of strength and confidence and reassurance to the people around you. So you would have carried that in your body, and that's part of what you guys are trained for, to carry that in your body.
But it's because we psychologically prepared ourselves. So Coast Guard, police, paramedics, ambulance, fire brigade, nurses, doctors. The more you can test yourself under pressure, and I can't stress it enough for people. I do scenario-based training. People are terrified of role plays. These are not role plays, but I make no apologies. I put everybody under a little bit of pressure during them in a safe environment. and we learn so much more about ourselves and other people. And sometimes, I mean, I've said earlier there, know what your own tells are when you're under pressure. Well, if you've never put yourself under pressure, how do you know? And the unconscious ones, you need somebody else assessing it to go, do you know you go really red when that happens? You go, I didn't. We'll say, okay, it's your thing, take it. You can't change it a lot of the time. And it's where people like you can say, well, this is how you can control your voice because you understand the diaphragm and stuff like that. That is so important. So it's not fighting against it. It's understanding what it is, understanding it's natural. Chaos is normal. Understanding the impact your behavior will have on others, i.e. it's a reason to make sure in certain situations you have to put a face of confidence on. But in that, you know, certainly in a leadership or management role, or as a trainer or a teacher like yourself, there's times you have to do that, but there's also times you have to be honest and say, guys, I'm not feeling it today. But it's all about practicing under pressure to understand what your triggers are, where your red lines are, and how you react, and then actually talking about you're psychologically preparing yourself, and that's so critical.
It's absolutely true. And of course, we have this thing about, you know, the brain and familiarity. And, you know, if you've been through, and that's obviously what all the military training and everything is that you're constantly running, you know, field exercises and this, that, and the other, so that when you're in that real situation, it's not the first time that you have felt that. And I think that's one of the, you know, the most powerful thing. I mean, you know, you've called your company Training for Reality, and it's because of that, isn't it? It's that protected, that safe, low stakes environment. But I guess it works a little bit like visualization does, that your brain is sort of experiencing well, more than visualization, because obviously if you do it you get all the sort of physical sensations as well, that if you're going through it in a safe, supportive, low stakes environment, but your brain still then, if you are in that situation, you're sort of familiar with it. You can your brain goes, oh, I've done this before, and when I did this before, I did it like this. So it's so much more powerful then. Is that also part of your work? Because I know you do a lot of work with women and girls and safety. Is that a similar thing?
It's again, great question, mate. The reason I do the training in the style I do it, so there's a thing called picture superiority in the brain. So we will remember more emotive things. We will remember colours, smells, we remember visuals, remember storytelling. In the main, some people are text orientated, and that could be because of, you know, neurodiverse conditions, or that's just their style of learning. But most of us will remember and enjoy more visual stuff or storytelling. Why? Because it's emotive. It goes into the sort of deeper memory. It creates stronger connections between the neural pathways. There's a thing called neuroplasticity, I'm sure you're aware about. No matter what age, your brain can still grow, but you have to practice, you have to train, you can learn new skills, etc. So you can teach an old dog new tricks effectively. But the reason that works and why I do that training, i.e. scenarios or stories, and they'll never remember my name when I walked out. I don't need them to. I need them to remember the stories. I need to remember the physical sensations, because the most important bit is when they're under pressure, that will get recalled under pressure. You may not get it right. In fact, chances are you won't get it right exactly the way. And sometimes just because it worked the last time definitely doesn't mean it's going to work the next time. But that's where, you know, you pivot, and I suppose your skill set of thinking outside the box and actually using your team and saying, okay, yeah, I'm the boss, or I'm the one in charge here. Anybody get any good ideas? Because I have no idea here. I'm lost for ideas is really important. But memorable delivery, memorable training, memorable courses like the stuff you teach, it's not about the real granular detail. It's about, has it went into the brain deep enough and been important enough or emotive enough then to recall it when under pressure? Because if they do, they will mitigate massively that fight, flight, and freeze. It will still be there, and you still want it to be there. But it's so important. Like, I will not do online training on certain courses. I just won't do it. I don't care what money you offer me. I won't do it, because that could be a lack of skill on my part. I cannot create the same energy in the same environment for people to remember it online when they're in the same room with people. And it's just one of my absolute red lines for certain courses. I will never train them online. So anybody watching, don't bother asking. Certain courses, they honestly, they have to be face to face.
But
for me, my teaching style.
But it's really interesting, because I've been actually on a slight tangent, I've been talking about that a lot this week. I've been speaking a lot this week, and that's one of the things I've been saying about networking. So it's complete tangent, but it's the same. In-person networking is so much more memorable because, so if we're having a conversation like this, I'm in my room, you're in your room. So the only sort of novelty here is that I'm talking to you, and obviously we're having a great conversation. There's some novelty there. But if we meet at a busy cafe, or we take a walk in the park or whatever, my brain is processing all of that. So in-person networking, when you're processing the coffee and the food and your journey there, and who else you met, and what group conversation you were in, there's so much more sticky than
it's more visceral. It really is.
Just the way the main memory works.
Exactly. And the irony is, here's me talking about I'll never do stuff online, and we're doing this online, so that's not lost on me. And of course there is a happy medium, and we know each other, and we've got similar knowledge and backgrounds in terms of what we teach and the type of benefits.
And this is a theoretical conversation.
There's a shared experience and a shared understanding.
And this is theoretical, and we're not trying to teach each other, and hopefully some people watching it are taking some value from it. But I think certainly if you're dealing with, this is the thing, you do this scenario based training, which is so different from the theoretical training. Anybody can read a book about hostage negotiation, or self-defense, or reading the room, whatever, but because of the way you teach it, I think that is so powerful. And particularly when you have teams that maybe their day to day is going to be very different from the day that they spend with you. And that will be so memorable for them, because they all learn from each other as well, don't they, in the room? Do you find that powerful?
And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely, I wish I'd have listened at school more. I left school at 16. I wanted to get into the military. That's all I wanted to do at the time. And I love psychology, and I learn every day. So it's really important that whatever stuff I'm talking about, I have to have the knowledge, not just the lived experience, but I have to have the science behind that. But also that I don't go into science. I won't teach stuff I don't know about. For my own integrity and credibility, I wouldn't do it. So there is absolutely a place for that. So a combination of the two is really powerful, which is why I love doing collaborations with some people. Maybe mental health awareness. I can collaborate with people like yourself. I don't know anything really about the way the diaphragm works and stuff like that. So that's why when we even chat to each other, we learn of each other every day, which I find fascinating as well. Because I can add layers of knowledge on that I don't have because I haven't experienced it. So it's getting the balance, like everything in life. It's getting the balance right. But if you don't practice, you don't know what your pressure points are.
It's low state. It's low state, because as you know, I run a group online program for speakers, and it's actually one of the most powerful things is the group calls, when people can sort of practice on each other in this very sort of safe and supportive container, because it's all to do with the granular, the incremental improvements. It's just it's the 1% all the time, isn't it?
But I can I have a thing I call it connection before content. Get rid of this. That's actually, excuse me, I did some self-defense training the other day for the Knife Angel project in Nottingham. That's BBC Radio Nottinghamshire calling me, so I'll call them back. You get top dead.
Get off the call. Well, actually, before we go, because we're coming up to a time, but before we go, because I know this is an area that we both wanted to talk about, which is the line between ethical influence and manipulation.
Oh, yes,
and I love this, because obviously, as someone who came from theatre, I know full well what a great actor or singer, I should say, what someone who's really great on stage or great in the room, what you can do, like what you can make other people do and feel. And how that you can change the energy in the room. You can change somebody else's energy by the way that you speak and you are with them. But of course, it's very, very interesting, because in your kind of world, there's going to be a line, isn't there, between influence and manipulation?
100%. I don't know. I made some notes on this one because there's key points I wanted to remember and get across.
Do it.
So while I'm finding this. the difference, there's a big difference between manipulation and influence and persuasion. So for me, persuasion is about short term, getting something to do a short term action. Whereas influence is longer term, it's more emotive. And that's sort of how I've learned about it in the research I've done in working with behavioral science units and different intelligence agencies. Manipulation is wrong. Is it used in some intelligence agencies across the world? Absolutely, no doubt about it. But for me, once you cross that ethical, legal line of persuasion and influence based on core values and trust and honesty, then you are into exploitation. So to me, manipulation equals exploitation. So let me give an example. If I was trying to get close to a subject of interest, let's call it, who I needed intelligence from about an upcoming bomb attack or a gang that was swapping guns around some part of the world, and I needed to talk to that person, would I manipulate my way into their friendship group? No, I will influence my way into their friendship group potentially in order to speak to them. How do I do that? Yes, the more I know about them, the better, of course. So I know where they're at, when they're going to be there. I know what they like and what they don't like. But the first time I break that trust by tricking them or manipulating them, if they find out, number one, I'm in trouble, they might be in trouble, the trust is gone, they won't do anything for me. Years and years and years of people trying to trick people in police interviews, it simply doesn't work. It always ends up in tears.
Yeah.
Because connection before content, human connection, for me, is the key to everything. It has to be. I have sat with terrorists and they have helped us, HMG UK, because they trusted me, the individual asking them. They didn't trust the government. They didn't trust other people. They trusted that I was asked them to do it because they had a relationship and a rapport. And I can't give a better example than that. Obviously, I can't say much more than that, but it came down to they were doing it for me or they were doing it for their family. So it was bigger picture thinking. I'm not doing this to get people in trouble. If I know, taking Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, so you know your physiological needs, your safety needs, your esteem, your belonging. If I know what people's motivators are, not vulnerabilities, that's blackmail, that's tantamount to blackmail, not vulnerabilities. If I know what people's motivators are, and I can leverage those motivators, you want to save your family, you want a better life for yourself, your kids. You want to earn money, but not just for the sake of money to buy a Ferrari. You want to earn money to give yourself a better life or secure your kids or get yourself through school or college. Those are important facts I know about that person. And I then am trying to help them achieve those goals, which in Maslow is the top of the triangle, self-actualization or reaching your potential in modern language. But once I step outside that trust circle, and they have to trust me and I have to trust them because they say where I was going to meet them. I say who they're meeting. We're potentially dead, both of us. And that's, so trust for me. And now there'll be people in the intelligence community that are listening to this going, oh, you're kidding. For me, that's my personal experience. It worked every single time, for years that I did it. So trust, authenticity, shared experience, and not manipulating their vulnerabilities, but actually leveraging their motivations. It to me is probably the best way to sum that up.
And this is the incredible power of human connection.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely incredible. Like how you can almost, you can feel sometimes that, like, for example, you can have a very tense situation, which through a conversation just dissipates. Alternatively, you can have a nice sort of little chat with a friend and suddenly something will happen and a massive argument goes on. But, you know, we influence each other so much, don't we, in sort of words and how we react. And it's amazing. I never cease to be amazed by the...
Yeah, so I wish I'd listened at school and wish I'd listened at school and went and done a master's in psychology, but I'm far too old and long in the tooth now to do it. But,
no, neuroplasticity.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, my neuroplasticity is more like plasticine at the minute.
Well, thank you so much.
No, thank you,
Garth.
Kaffy.
There's so much value there for people, and obviously, I could talk to you all day about your experiences. Can I just ask you one tiny little thing that I'm really curious about?
Go
So
on
we
then.
talked earlier about sometimes it's not appropriate for your emotions to show in that moment. So you on 7/7, and you've got a job to do.
Yeah.
And it's not appropriate for those emotions to show in that moment. Did you sometimes used to find that your emotions would catch up on you later because you can't suppress them forever? Do they come back days, weeks afterwards?
Yeah, I'd go further than saying you don't want to suppress them, because when you know the physiological effects, think fight, flight, and freeze. When you don't suppress your emotions, and I'm not a qualified counsellor, but I have personal experience of this.
Yeah.
When you don't, if you try and suppress them, and you're on amber red, your body switch off your digestive system. You get tense, you get headaches, you stop eating, you get grumpier, you can't sleep. All those things is like having permanent fight, flight, and freeze. It will damage your body. It will damage your psychology. Potentially, it will kill you. It can lead to depression, a variety of different things. It's important, and especially with blokes, we tend to not talk about it as much. It's so good to see things like Andy's Man's Club and the fact that men are more willing to talk about things. That's really, really important. And I'd encourage anybody to talk to anybody.
I was going to say, so where do you? So if you meet someone that has trauma in their past or whatever, who do you recommend? So Andy's Man Club, you've mentioned. Who do you recommend that people talk to? Is there an organisation, or should they find?
There's so many good ones out there. Kaffy. I mean, if I can, there's a lady I've used myself, a lady called Emma South that's based in Lincoln as a counsellor. The Americans, I spent 4 months out in the States working with the FBI and different forces years ago and learned a lot, very different. But they go and they speak to counsellors the way we go to dentists and doctors. And it's getting rid of that shame and that stigma. It's like, go and talk to somebody. In fact, sometimes you want to talk to somebody that has no experience of what you've done, because there's no judgment. But I think we all need to sort of step up. The world's a busier place. It's less tolerant. It's faster paced. It's talk to somebody. Have your quiet time when you need it. But appreciate that the brain and the body will eventually shut you down like that if you don't listen to it. And you can't blame it, because it's trying to protect you. It's going into survival mode. And if that means saying you're off work for the next 6 months with a heart attack, that's what it's going to do. So it's a great question to finish on. But speak to people. It's a strength, not a weakness. 100%. And you need to rest and digest and get that the parasympathetic nervous system back on track.
Decompression.
100%.
Yes, exactly.
Easier said than done. All of what we've talked about is easier said than done. But,
brilliant. Thank you so very much, and thank you everybody for watching, and anyone who's watching this back on replay.
Thank you for everybody.
You can find Garth on LinkedIn, and myself, Kaffy, and have a great week, everybody.
Lovely. Thanks, mate. Take care.